take the risk, be expressive as possible, be evocative, be engaging. You have to take that risk if you feel that you can actually have your own voice, say something that's a little bit different and offers that different interpretation to the public.
I want to start by thanking you, Minna, so much for agreeing to be a guest today. And the only downside to it, I have to be honest, is because I know you from high school and it forced me to count how many years that had been. I didn't like the answer.
Well, we don't have to, do the math.
No, and we're not going to say the number out loud because it really doesn't matter.
That's right.
But I have been impressed by you since I knew you in school because you were one of those people with such a single-minded focus on what it was that you wanted to do, which was to be a classical pianist. So can you just tell me a little bit more about when you first started playing the piano and why?
Sarah, thank you for having me, on your podcast. I mean, it's always a great honor and a privilege, and to actually share, my thoughts in terms of art and in life. But I mean, in terms of when I actually started learning piano, that was basically at the age of 6. And it's one of those kind of weird circumstances. I was actually suffering quite a number of ailments, when I was really, really young. So I was basically spending a lot of time convalescing at home. So I would actually listen to my mom at that time when she was learning piano as a hobby. She would actually practice. And I think from there, the little seed was already planted. So one evening I decided, this is kind of interesting. Nobody's actually touching the keyboard. I ended up just, climbing up on the bench because I was really, really small at that time and starting just to play on the keys. And I think at that moment, my mom, figured out that perhaps she's actually interested in learning piano. So that's really where it all started. It's just that that seemingly insignificant incident, very innocently, naively, that led obviously to, as we know now, my career in piano performance.
That's amazing. I actually didn't know you were sick when you were younger, so I didn't know that background.
Well, when you're very energetic, it sort of masks everything, but my health was not very strong at that time. I mean, got better, of course, considering the fact that after you're visiting so many, times at the hospital and then seeing doctors, finally your things got resolved. But again, you have to be careful because everything is interrelated. And considering the fact that nowadays everything is, fast paced, there's a lot of pressure, there's a lot of stress. That will take obviously a bit of toll on the health as well. So I have to also be very careful not to overdo things. Although generally speaking, I never really learned my past lessons. My mission, as an artist, is really to be able to move audiences. And also just to share what I've actually have discovered and the repertoire that I've actually have explored. Sometimes my repertoire is not your traditional, conventional repertoire, the same romantic war horses you hear many times, in various concerts around the world. I like to kind of explore and discover pieces that are written by lesser known composers or lesser known works. And present them, and my main goal, of course, is to try to make it as accessible and engaging and entertaining and expressive and evocative, based on, of course, my knowledge and my interpretation, and then, to share this with the public. You end up developing your interpretation. But the thing is with the interpretation, it evolves over time. It doesn't come instantaneously. 1 hour I spent on learning this piece and boom, it's already there and it's carved, in stone. That's not usually the case. And it's rarely the case. You're always experimenting. You're always trying to find what's the most compelling aspect that you want to evoke. eventually things go shape, and then you go from there, and then you can consistently and continually reevaluate your interpretation. So the piece that I perform, let's say, today, you might hear me perform the same piece, but in different light in terms of the interpretation, because I have seen other, ideas or other things as I've actually worked on the piece. So it's constantly evolving.
What would be your favorite piece if you look at your career in terms of your evolution of where you've started and where you are and where you'll continue going?
The problem is the repertoire is so extensive. I can't choose one particular favorite piece. I mean, I have different composers. I have, different favorite works. So, I mean, it could be also not necessarily just for, solo piano. It could be a piece with orchestra, like the concerto, like the fourth concerto of Beethoven, for example, which is quite an enormous workhorse. And it's just a question of, I guess, what's my mood? What's my inspiration? I also enjoy playing Prokofiev. I enjoy doing Rachmaninoff. He actually wrote a beautiful set of songs for voice, and there's actually transcriptions of those songs. And the pianist who actually has done a phenomenal job in doing the transcriptions is the American pianist Earl Wild. So I don't have a favorite piece.
Okay, I probably didn't ask that the right way. In terms of your growth as a pianist, so when you see how you've developed from when you first started and you continue to grow musically, is there a piece that you could say, this one really shows how when I was younger and I first started playing, I had this kind of approach to it. And as I grew to understand the music and all my experience with all the different things that I played, I could see myself evolving, and I could continue to see myself evolving. Maybe it's a composer. Maybe it's like Beethoven. Like, I know Beethoven and I have a thing where I have grown so much by playing Beethoven, and I could see myself continuing to grow till my last day playing.
Well, a perfect example, as you said, it's Beethoven. Yes, absolutely.
Oh, that was a total fluke. It was the one Rachmaninoff. Who else did she mention? Beethoven. Okay.
Well, I mean, yeah. We'll start with Beethoven. I mean, Beethoven. I mean, he himself, he's a very intellectual composer. If you look at his middle period works, certainly, I mean, when I'm actually performing his piano sonatas, or even like working with, in terms of chamber music, with a violinist, the piano and violin sonatas, I mean, certainly when I'm playing it when I was like 14 years old, obviously I'm going to have a totally different, perspective when I'm playing it now, because you've actually, all that knowledge that you actually accumulated. Okay, so I mean, you went to school, you've done the academic stuff, you accumulate a lot of knowledge. So it's not gone to waste. It's just a question of how you want to apply, that information. So a lot of times it's like, oh, I didn't realize this until like I'm working at reviving the work now. So you are taking a different perspective. You have, if you're actually reviving the work, you actually have already laid down pretty much the foundation, but it's always the interpretation that becomes more interesting, because you've grown, you matured. The artistry is, obviously evolving. So things will shape according to your perception, your perspective, and in terms of your personality and in your character. And depending on where you are in terms of your life journey, again, that could also have, an impact in terms of how you see the piece. And this is something that you try to share with the public to make it more personal and to try to connect to the audience. You do the best you can to respect what's given in terms of the actual score. And that's where the interpretation, plays, because there's some things that are not indicated in the score, and it's up to the artist, the performing artist, to make that piece come alive. It's like giving, a script to an actor. I mean, literally, it's just black and white. There's just words. There are certain directions, so telling the actor what you have to do and so forth. But it's literally, a piece of paper with all these black words. So it's very similar in terms of music. I mean, the score is just black and white. It's just a question of how you want to bring the music live and to bring that excitement and that engaging element, so you're able to connect to the audience and to say, okay, here's this piece, and I'm trying to say what I think is what the piece is telling us.
I think I hadn't thought about it enough, obviously, and it's way more complicated than I realized, but I was just picturing this like a 3-point connection between the musician who is at a point in her career and her evolution as a musician. There are the members of the audience that are all at different places in terms of their evolution as listeners or connoisseurs of music. And then there's even the composers at different stages in their career and where they were. And so there's a huge interplay. So interesting that I don't know anything about.
This trilogical relationship, I mean, it's really, really important. I mean, this is why, very often I struggle to come up with a program or, to come up with a project that evolves in terms of, okay, what's the piece? What's the point here? Because you can perform a piece, a 21st century piece that's really contemporary, but it's avant-garde. And then you're going to lose your audience because, again, it's that nice connection, in terms of what you're telling. I mean, the audience, the performer, and then the composer. If the audience doesn't connect at all to the piece that you're trying to perform, you lost them.
Tell me about the new project that you're working on, because it looks really cool.
It's quite an ambitious and audacious project. I didn't even realize until, I started working on it. It's like, oh, really? I got myself into it. Initially, I mean, it was meant to be a very simple music video. Here's the piece, here I performed, and that was it. But because the piece, there's, a bit of some association with paintings, the works were actually chosen after the piece was written, that I figured, oh, that's kind of interesting. Maybe we can actually connect the different forms of art, have sort of the interaction. And then one thing led to another. And eventually it became not just a music video, but a performance video, because I incorporated theater, painting, and dance. So we have 4 different art forms involved in the project. Sonate Tableaux, which is the name of the project, which is and the album, and also the complimentary music video, which has been right now garnering a lot of attention and recognition, in different corners of the world. I mean, this is to my pleasant surprise, because I never even thought that this could be something that people would be really interested. I'm a classical pianist, and this is the kind of the first time that I'm actually being a producer. Huge responsibility, and to take it from, a very simple conception to something that's a little bit more elaborate, and working with an amazing team of creative collaborators. It's been quite an interesting artistic journey.
I have to just comment, because as you were speaking, when you first started describing the project, I couldn't help it. I imagine that you've gone from the triangle to like the 6-pointed star, because you've incorporated 3 other elements of interpretation by artists who are at their stages of career, who are also trying to connect with audience. So now you've got this really full tapestry of connections that are happening all over the place, which is amazing.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, again, when you're working on the project at that moment, you don't realize what you're getting yourself into. You start, here's my interpretation, and of course, you give the performance to the other artists, who then reinterpret their version of their performance piece, and then we put it together. And I let basically, my film team, do all the magic, and this is what comes out. And it's been quite an interesting ride, and being able to explore, being able to go outside your comfort zone, because again, I mean, I have no experience in dance. I have no knowledge in terms of painting, or even in mime for that matter. But I mean, just to bring different elements, it's again a reimagination of an interpretation of a natural music work, which I would actually, since based on, this past experience, I would like to continue doing it. Of course, it's all a question of funding, which is always, the biggest obstacle. But if there's funding, I certainly would like to continue to explore. And I think a lot of artists probably who I've been working with probably want to also explore with me and see if we can actually, again, create something that's original and also, engaging.
Well, you're out there winning prizes.
Well, it was a big surprise. We were not expecting all these awards. I mean, the first award came back in December. This was at the Fifth Music Film Festival. It's based in Los Angeles, but it was held in Buenos Aires. And we've got the news that we won the best classical music video. So I thought, okay, at least, as a classical musician, I mean, at least I'm doing something right. Someone's appreciating my work. I think we've found our niche, and I think we want to continue developing and exploring the language that we created, and we'll see what happens. I mean, it's been busy because I've been working, towards preparing for my launch, which is coming up on June 15th. So it's just getting, the word out and creating more interest and, picking people's, curiosity and see where this all goes, because a project is a project. And if you don't show it, it's not worth the project itself.
You were particularly smart to be involved in a project like that during the time of COVID, because I imagine you weren't able to perform live for the last.
Well, in actual fact, the project, we actually started working on the pre-production back in 2019. Things got a little bit complicated because I had some health issues. Just as I was actually starting the production stage, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. So it was a bit of a curveball that I was not really expecting. But again, it's just a question of being, very determined. I did all the treatments and so forth, so I'm now fine, and I was back on track, more or less. I mean, I had an amazing team who was extremely patient and understanding. So for them, usually I'm at the mercy of people. They were actually at the mercy of me this time, So luckily, unfortunately, the recovery was rather swift. So I was able to, get back on track of things and be able to resume practicing and get back onto the project. And then COVID hit. We basically had everything literally, filmed. So we were able to actually continue working on the post-production. And we took advantage of the time, because considering the fact that we kind of wanted to have the launch back in 2020, but that couldn't happen because COVID was doing its thing. And so we've took advantage of the time and really finessed, the editing and coming up with creative and original presentation of the actual musical, performances involved. And COVID's been going up and down, and the launch itself has been delayed many, many times. So I mean, we're keeping our fingers crossed. I mean, finally, it's going to happen. And we're ready, to unveil to the world.
That's amazing. You're indomitable. You were just like an unstoppable force.
Well, I mean, even the Energizer Bunny has to recharge the batteries at some point. So I do have a lot of energy. I mean, a lot of things going in my mind. I'm always creating something. I'm always thinking about something. It keeps me obviously very active and very busy. I like that. I mean, that's just because that's me. I know there's some people who are like, whoa, you're going too fast. You can stop now. But it's just that there's so much that I want to do. And if I have the time to come up with another project and be able to continue doing what I enjoy doing, it sounds very ambitious. But that's my raison d'être as an artist. And I always like to come up with something else just to surprise the audience, to come up with something different. It's again just giving people, a chance just to be entertained.
How would you compare the experience of the Sonate Tableaux performance video, all the work that you did on that, to live performance when it's you on the stage with a piano? How is that different?
Well, when you're recording and when you're shooting, there is no audience, right? So first of all, you don't have that, you don't feel the dynamic in like the energy in the hall. You may feel it amongst your film crew, who's sort of moving their cameras here, there, left, and right, and center. But the microphones are actually, on stage, and that's it. Where you're on stage doing a live performance, you have the audience, and you feel their energy. You know when they're really, engaged. You feel when they're really enthusiastic and very encouraging. And you actually just respond to that. So as an artist, the more energy that you feel in the hall, in the concert hall, it actually gives you more momentum to really connect with the audience, and even to perform even better than you can do. And you're just living the moment, when you're on stage. When you're recording, of course, you do, one take. You're kind of happy with it, but you're not always happy, because as an artist, you tend to be a perfectionist, but you never will attain to be a perfectionist, because we're all human. So you always try and do another take, and that, it's being recorded. So anything that I make, there's a mistake, or something I'm not happy with, it's documented. So you can't change that. Whereas when you're performing, in a live situation, even if there's a mistake, it's gone. It's part of the experience. It's part of that, that moment. And that's sometimes what makes it really exciting, when you're actually listening and going to a live performance. It's that energy that you feel.
I was kind of imagining that I would never survive as a performer on stage. I would be terrified. I would be one of those people which I think was so tongue-tied, and my fingers wouldn't work if I was trying to play piano. But it's just, I find that so interesting. Like, I just am not built that way. There is no way. I do not come alive as the star of the show on the stage at all. But I can see even the way that, just the way your face lights up when you talk about being on stage is wonderful.
Well, I live to perform. I think it's perhaps maybe in my blood. There's no other profession that my passion basically lies in creating music, in performing, is to share that with people. So, I mean, even if it's just, a hall of just 100 people or 1,000 people, it makes no difference, because I'm there on stage. I'm there to be expressive. I'm there to perform this piece that I feel that I have a connection with. It's my passion. It's something that I'm able to speak through the music. And I mean, just to be able to make people cry, for example, again, it's just telling me that, I've accomplished my mission. And I'm always very touched by audiences, and by people who come up to me and say, "Oh, you made me cry because of that performance," or it really, struck up, a note in my heart. So if I'm able to at least, get someone to cry in one of my concerts, I think I've done a pretty good job.
I know you have your hands full and you're getting ready to launch this new project, but do you have any live performances planned? Is that something you're going to get back to, or planning already?
I would like to, but because of COVID, as we all know, it basically, the moment COVID struck, it crippled the entire industry. It would be very interesting to see, after the launch, what people would think about the project. now that the album's coming out, it's going to be released on, again, on the 15th of June. And if concert presenters or festivals would be interested, I would be delighted to create sort of a live, like an adaptation of the music video for a live performance, having, of course, the three other women artists on stage.
That would be so cool. That would
be so cool. But it's just a question again, in terms of who would be interested, who would be willing to present, and where would the funding come from, right? Because it's always a question of, because everybody has to get paid, right? Everyone has to get all the expenses taken care of. So it's definitely going to be a huge project, but I'm definitely, it's on my to-do list. The thing is, being an artist, you have to take the risk. And, you can't just say, because the traditional way of performing, this particular work has to be done this way. Yes, to a certain point, but you also have to think outside the box. And so the moment you travel on the unbeaten path, of course, you're going to be criticized left, right, and center, because if you are offering something that's completely different from what is considered to be the mainstream or status quo, of course, the first reaction would be, hey, what was this? But at the same time, depending, again, if you're open enough, you're also willing to explore and discover a different way of perceiving things. If you're strong-minded, because the thing is, as a performing artist, you cannot please every single person around the world. There are going to be some people who actually think you're brilliant, and there are those who think you're sort of outlandish and you're just lost your marbles because you're doing something completely not mainstream. But this is the risk that you take. And I personally just follow my heart and my intuition. And I know that when I create something, it's always going to sound compelling. It's always going to sound exciting and expressive. I always try to make it as beautiful as possible. Of course, based on, the compositional idiom, because for example, Prokofiev, you're not going to sound that terribly beautiful with all the dissonant, chords. But it's just a question of being very strong in the industry, because it's so competitive and there's a lot of discrimination, and there's a lot of obstacles that are going to be thrown at you, and also sometimes very deceptive. But you just have to trust yourself, because very often when you hear people say, okay, the reason why we didn't like your interpretation because of such and such reason, you tend to then have maybe some self-doubt, because obviously you're so involved in the project, it becomes quite personal. But you have to step back and you have to understand also that that particular person is perceiving, the interpretation in one way based on his or her knowledge, his or her background. Perhaps the person doesn't actually have had the experience of studying with different let's say piano teachers, so you're not going to get a different perspective in terms of the ways of playing the piano, the ways of interpreting the piano. So that will definitely color the prejudiced feedback or criticism. Whereas I've actually have studied with so many different piano teachers and also consulted with different pianists, that sometimes their styles are so different, they're very extreme. But this is how you open up your eyes and open your ears, because the sky's the limit, and music is a language, and there's so many ways of expressing yourself, and it's just a question of finding what works best for you.
One of my favorite life lessons that I've learned quite late is that if you're really committed and you really love what you're doing, and somebody else says, I don't like that, it just means that they're not your audience.
Well, that's
your
it.
audience
That's
is somewhere else. It's not theirs. And that's okay, because
That's
somebody
okay. I
else
mean,
will, that they'll find somebody else.
The thing is, art is so subjective. If I'm not their cup of tea, that's fine. I'm pretty sure that I'll be able to connect with another person in the audience who probably is extremely grateful and really appreciates, what I do. It just all depends. What are your preferences and what you like and what you don't like. And it all comes down to, like your background, your knowledge, interest. And I, as an artist, I just like to be creative, and if it's your cup of tea, thanks. Great. Thank you, Sarah, again. Thank you for your time today.
No, I really enjoyed it. That was super fun. Thank you for saying yes.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.